Dad, you should just sit quietly and let the real adults handle this. You're too old to understand money anymore. That's what my son, Eric, told me, in front of his wife and two kids, while we sat around the dinner table at his house, in Bloomington, Indiana. He said it with a laugh, but there was no humor in his eyes. His wife, Kelly, smirked, sipping her wine like she agreed. My grandkids just looked down, embarrassed. I can still hear those words echoing in my head. Too old to understand. As if the years I'd spent working double shifts at the GM plant, the nights I came home covered in grease and sweat, meant nothing. As if decades of paying mortgages, balancing checkbooks, and saving every dime so my family wouldn't struggle didn't count for a thing. Before I continue, if you're new here, please like, comment, and subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. My name is Richard Lawson. I'm 71 years old, a retired factory man, and a widower. My wife, Mary, passed away 6 years ago after a long fight with cancer. And let me tell you, after she was gone, the only thing that kept me moving forward was family. My son, Eric, and my daughter, Laura. Laura lives out in Columbus, Ohio, with her husband and two little ones. She calls me every week, sometimes twice. She asks how I'm eating, if I'm getting my walks in, if I need help around the house. Eric? Well, Eric's different. He grew up watching me come home tired, and instead of respecting the grind, he resented it. He wanted the finer things, cars, gadgets, vacations. I gave him what I could, but he always wanted more. When Mary passed, he became distant, only calling when he needed something, a loan, a cosign, a favor, and now, at that dinner table, he didn't even hide it. Dad, you've done enough, he said between bites of roast beef. Why don't you just enjoy retirement and let me and Kelly handle things? I mean, you won't be around forever. It's only logical that we start managing the estate now. I nearly choked on my water. Estate? Eric? I'm not dead yet. Kelly gave a tight smile. We're not saying that, Richard. We're just saying sometimes older folks can make mistakes. It might be better if Eric took over your finances now, so things are smooth later. Later? Meaning after I was gone. They were already circling like vultures. I set my fork down, my hands trembling, not from weakness, but from anger. My finances are fine. My house is paid for. My savings are solid, and I know exactly where every dime is going. I don't need your help. Eric rolled his eyes. Dad, you don't even do online banking. You still balance a checkbook with a pen. You're living in the Stone Age. You're lucky I'm offering to step in. It wasn't an offer. It was a demand, dressed up to look polite. That night, when I drove home in the dark, the street lights casting long shadows across the empty road, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Humiliation. My own son thought I was senile, incompetent, ready to be stripped of everything I'd worked for. But what he didn't realize was this. While I may be old, I am not naive. I've lived long enough to know when someone's after something that isn't theirs. And I wasn't about to sit back and let Eric treat me like a feeble old man. Because if he thought I was done fighting, he was about to find out just how sharp an old man's claws can still be. A few days later, I was sitting at my kitchen table in Bloomington, sipping black coffee and reading the paper, when my phone buzzed. It was Eric. He never called unless he wanted something. Dad, he said, skipping any pleasantries. I talked with a financial advisor. He says it'd be smart to put your assets in my name now. Avoid probate later. Make things easier. I set my mug down slowly. My assets are in my name for a reason, Eric. And probate Isn't your concern while I'm alive? He gave a little laugh, the kind that dripped with arrogance. Come on, Dad. Don't be stubborn. Kelly and I have been handling things for years. Bills, the mortgage. I cut him off. I paid every bill on that house you live in. I co-signed your mortgage when the bank wouldn't trust your credit. Don't you dare tell me you've been handling things for me. There was a pause, then a sharp edge in his tone. Look, you're getting older. It's only a matter of time before mistakes happen. Wouldn't it be better if I took over now, before something slips through the cracks? That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. His words rolled over and over in my mind. Before something slips through the cracks. No, this wasn't about mistakes. This was about control. He wanted my house, my savings, my entire life's work. And he was getting bolder. 2 days. Later, I went over to Eric's place to drop off some tools he'd borrowed months ago. When I walked in, I overheard a conversation between him and Kelly in the kitchen. Kelly whispered, "Once he signs everything over, we can finally redo this place. Imagine knocking down that wall, getting granite counters." Eric chuckled. "Trust me, he'll cave. He's too soft to say no to me for long." I froze in the hallway, my blood boiling. Soft? That boy had no idea what it meant to be tough. Waking up at 5 a.m. every day for 40 years, grinding until your bones ached just to keep food on the table. And now he called me soft? I stepped into the kitchen, making them jump. "I didn't know I was financing your remodeling dreams." Kelly flushed, but Eric smirked, like he wasn't ashamed at all. "Dad, don't be dramatic. It's just smart planning. You don't need that house forever. Think about your grandkids. Think about leaving a legacy." I looked him dead in the eye. A legacy isn't granite countertops. The silence that followed was thick. Kelly muttered something about getting the kids ready for bed and slipped out. Eric just stared at me, jaw tight. "You're making this harder than it needs to be, Dad," he said finally. I leaned in close, my voice steady. "And you're forgetting who you're talking to. I may be old, but I'm not dead. And I sure as hell haven't lost my mind." I left before he could say another word. But as I drove home, one thought kept circling in my head. This wasn't just disrespect anymore. It was a threat. If I didn't act soon, Eric would find a way to trap me, maybe even trick me into signing something I didn't understand. That's when I made my decision. The next morning, I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in years. Mr. Callahan, the same lawyer who helped me settle Mary's estate after she passed. A man who knew how to tie up loose ends airtight. When he answered, I didn't waste a second. "Bill, it's Richard Lawson. I need to talk. It's about my will." Bill Callahan's office hadn't changed a bit since I last stepped in 6 years ago. Same oak bookshelves, same faint smell of old leather and fresh coffee. Bill himself looked older, but his handshake was as firm as ever. "Richard Lawson," he said with a smile. "Haven't seen you since we sorted out Mary's estate. How are you holding up?" I sat down heavily in the chair across from his desk. "I was doing all right, Bill, until my son decided I was too old to manage my own life." His smile faded. "Tell me everything." So I did. I told him about the dinner table insults, the Bertie phone call about putting assets in Eric's name, and the conversation I overheard with Kelly about granite countertops. Bill listened carefully, fingers steepled under his chin, nodding slowly. When I finished, he leaned back. "Richard, you've worked your whole life for what you have. Don't you let anyone guilt you into handing it over. You're not senile, and you sure as hell aren't incompetent. But if Eric's pressing this hard, you need to protect yourself." I nodded. That's why I came to you. I want everything airtight, ironclad. I want no room for interpretation. Bill reached into his desk and pulled out a yellow legal pad. We'll set up two things. First, a living trust. Your assets stay under your control while you're alive, but when you pass, they go exactly where you decide. Second, an updated will, just in case. That way, even if Eric tries something, he won't get a dime unless you want him to. A small smile tugged at the corner of my mouth. Good, because I know who deserves it. And it isn't him. Bill raised an eyebrow. Laura? I nodded. My daughter's been there for me. She never asked for a thing. Always calling, checking in, making sure I'm all right. She should inherit the house and the savings. Eric's already shown me what he'd do if he got his hands on it. Bill jotted notes quickly. We can make it so clear that even if he contests it, the court will laugh him out the door. Do you want to leave him anything at all? I thought about it for a long moment. Then I let out a dry chuckle. Maybe $1, just so the record shows he wasn't forgotten. He was excluded. Bill smirked. Classic move. I'll draw it up. Walking out of that office, papers in hand, I felt lighter. Not younger, not stronger. Just steadier. Like I'd finally found my footing after weeks of being pushed off balance. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't just about legal protection. No, I wanted Eric to see the truth with his own eyes, to watch his greed come back to crush him. And life handed me the perfect opportunity. 2 weeks later, Bill called again. Richard, the paperwork's finalized. We just need you and your kids to attend the reading so it's official. I hesitated. Both kids? Standard procedure, he said. It'll leave no doubt. They'll all hear it straight from me. At first, I wasn't sure. But then I imagined Eric's face when he realized the empire he thought was falling into his lap was gone. That smug confidence draining away in front of witnesses. And suddenly, I wanted it. Set it up. I told Bill the date was marked. The Lawson family would gather in that oak-paneled office, surrounded by the smell of paper and ink, to hear the truth. And Eric, my arrogant, greedy son, would finally understand that old age doesn't mean weakness. But before that day came, he pulled one last stunt. Because 3 nights before the will reading, Eric showed up at my house unannounced, a stack of papers in his hand. Dad, he said, setting them down on my kitchen table, I just need you to sign these. It's nothing complicated, just some financial housekeeping. You'll thank me later. I looked at the papers, then back at him, and I realized he wasn't just greedy, he was desperate. Eric sat across from me at my kitchen table, sliding those papers toward me like a snake offering fruit. Just sign, Dad, he said, voice honeyed but tense. It'll save a lot of trouble later. I picked them up, flipping through. Legal jargon, half-baked clauses, but one line caught my eye. Transfer of beneficial ownership. He wasn't even hiding it anymore. He wanted everything in his name before I was even in the ground. I set the papers down slowly. Eric, do you think I don't know how to read? He smirked, masking his nerves. Come on, Dad. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. I leaned forward, meeting his eyes. No, son. Don't you make this harder than it needs to be. Now get out of my house. For the first time in years, I saw him falter. His mouth opened, then shut. Finally, he grabbed the papers, muttered a curse, and stormed out. 3 days later, we were all in Bill Callahan's office. The air smelled faintly of leather and dust, and the heavy grandfather clock ticked in the corner like it was counting down to something inevitable. Laura sat beside me, calm but curious. Eric and Kelly came in late, whispering to each other, their confidence painted on like cheap cologne. Bill adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. We're here today for the reading of Richard Lawson's will and confirmation of his living trust. Mr. Lawson has updated his documents to reflect his current wishes. Eric smirked, elbowing Kelly. Here it comes, he whispered. Bill began reading. He spoke of my assets, my house, fully paid off, my pension and savings, even Mary's, jewelry, still locked in a box in the bedroom closet. Eric sat taller with every word, already counting the money in his head. And then Bill's tone shifted. To my daughter, Laura Reynolds, I leave the family home, all personal property therein, and the bulk of my estate, including savings and investments. Laura's eyes went wide. She turned to me, whispering, Dad. But I kept my gaze forward. Eric sat frozen, his smirk cracking. Wait, what? Bill continued, unflinching. To my son, Eric Lawson, I leave the sum of $1 for reasons he knows well. The room went dead silent. The ticking clock seemed louder, like it was mocking him. $1? Kelly's face flushed crimson. This must be a mistake. Bill shook his head, tapping the papers. No mistake. Mr. Lawson made his intentions very clear. The trust is legally binding. The will reinforces it. Contesting this would be pointless. Eric's face went red, then pale. His jaw clenched. Dad, you can't do this. I'm your son. Finally, I turned to him, my voice steady but heavy with years of disappointment. You stopped being my son the day you tried to strip me of my dignity, the day you looked me in the eye and called me too old to understand my own life. That's when you chose greed over family. Laura squeezed my hand under the table, tears in her eyes. Eric shot up, knocking his chair back. This is bull! Bill raised a hand calmly. Mr. Lawson, I'd advise you to leave before you say something that makes things worse. The law is not on your side. Eric looked around the room, desperate. Kelly glared at him, realizing her granite countertops were slipping away. Laura sat quietly, holding back tears, but her face glowed with gratitude. And me? For the first time in months, I felt peace. Eric stormed out, slamming the door so hard the glass rattled in its frame. Kelly scurried after him, muttering under her breath. The office was quiet again, but the damage was done. In that moment, Eric's entire fantasy, his control, his arrogance, his inheritance, had crumbled, and everyone had witnessed it. Still, as satisfying as that was, the real justice wasn't finished yet, because in a town like Bloomington, news spreads faster than wildfire, and by the end of the week, Eric's name would be dragged through every diner booth and bar stool in Monroe County. By the next morning, word had already spread through Bloomington. I was eating eggs and toast at Lou's Diner when I noticed heads turning. Folks whispered at booths, some even giving me a little nod of respect. That's how it works in a small Midwestern town. Everyone knows when someone tries to pull a fast one, and everyone knows when justice is served. The waitress, Nancy, poured me another cup of coffee and leaned in with a smile. Heard about what happened in Callahan's office yesterday. Good for you, Mr. Lawson. About time someone stood up to that boy. I just nodded. Had to be done. By the end of the week, Eric couldn't set foot in town without someone giving him a look. At the gas station, the clerk told me he'd seen Eric arguing with Kelly in the parking lot, her voice loud enough to turn heads. All this planning, and we get $1? People laughed about it over beers at the VFW hall. Even his buddies at the golf course started keeping their distance. Eric had built his whole life on the illusion of being in control. Flashy trucks, talking big, acting like he was the smartest guy in the room. Now he couldn't walk into a grocery store without someone smirking at him. And the house he thought he'd inherit? It was Laura's now. She moved in with her family, filling the place with laughter again. I'd visit often, sit on the porch with my grandkids, and for the first time in years, I felt like the Lawson home had life in it again. Not greed, not entitlement, just love. Eric tried calling me a few times. I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. One evening, sitting alone on that porch as the sun dipped behind the sycamores, I thought about Mary. I imagined her sitting beside me, her hand on mine, whispering, "You did right, Richard. You protected what mattered." And she was right. Eric lost everything he thought he was entitled to. Not just money or a house, but respect, dignity. The one thing he never understood was that legacy isn't about wealth. It's about the love you leave behind. As for me, I gained something money can't buy: peace. So if you're listening to this and you've ever been betrayed by the people you sacrificed for, remember this: you're not powerless. Dignity can't be stolen, not if you fight for it. Tell us your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories.